I never thought I would catch my own parents plotting against my grandfather. Their voices filled our kitchen that Sunday night as my accidental phone call connected us. "That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise," my father said coldly. My mother laughed. "The mansion will be ours by Christmas." My blood froze as I realized what they were planning. My grandfather Franklin had raised me when they were too busy chasing money. Now they wanted his fortune. I quietly pressed end call and dialed another number instead. Growing up, I always knew my family was different. Not because we were wealthy, but because of the tension that money created between us. My name is Lonnie Harrison, and at 32 years old, I've witnessed firsthand how fortune can corrupt even the closest blood ties. My grandfather Franklin is a self-made tech billionaire. At 78, he still has that spark in his eyes that helped him build Harrison Technologies from his garage in the 1980s. His $25 million mansion in Westchester County sits on 10 acres of pristine woodland. The property has been the center of family gatherings for as long as I can remember, a symbol of what determination and hard work can achieve. But it's also become the object of my father Patrick's obsession. Dad never made it big like Grandpa. He tried several business ventures that all collapsed within a year or two. Each failure only deepened his resentment toward the man who succeeded where he couldn't. I remember the snide comments during family dinners, the eye rolls whenever Grandpa mentioned a new achievement, and the bitter arguments that would erupt over seemingly nothing. "Your grandfather thinks his money makes him better than everyone else," Dad would tell me when I was younger. "One day, he'll see that success isn't just measured in dollar signs." My mother Diane was no better. If anything, she encouraged Dad's resentment while maintaining a sweet facade around Grandpa. She came from modest means and married into the Harrison name with stars in her eyes, only to find herself one generation removed from the real fortune. Mom's taste for luxury always exceeded our upper-middle-class budget, and I often caught her eyeing Grandpa's possessions with barely concealed envy. "Just imagine what we could do with even a fraction of that money," she'd whisper to Dad when she thought no one was listening. "Your father owes you for all those years you helped with the company before he pushed you out." The truth was, Dad had worked for Grandpa for only 3 years before being asked to leave due to his constant absenteeism and poor performance. But in his mind, he'd been betrayed and denied his birthright. I was the oddity in this dynamic. When my parents were busy chasing investment opportunities or attending networking events trying to climb social ladders, I spent weekends and summers with Grandpa Franklin. He taught me to fish on the lake behind his mansion, showed me how to code my first program, and listened to my dreams without judgment. While my parents saw me as an extension of themselves, Grandpa saw me as my own person. "You don't have to follow anyone's path but your own, Lonnie," he told me once while we sat on his wraparound porch watching a thunderstorm roll in. "Not mine, not your father's. Find what makes your heart race with excitement, and chase that." Those words shaped my life more than any others. I became a digital privacy consultant, ironically using skills Grandpa taught me but forging my own path outside the family business. Recently, Grandpa's health had become a concern. A mild heart attack last winter put him on medication and regular doctor visits. Though still mentally sharp as ever, his physical limitations had become more apparent. He needed a cane to walk long distances and tired more easily. Despite this, he maintained his independence and continued managing his considerable business interests and philanthropic foundation. The family tension reached a breaking point 3 months ago, when Grandpa announced his intention to donate half his fortune to educational charities upon his death. "I've been fortunate beyond measure," he explained during a family dinner. "I want to create opportunities for bright young minds who lack resources." The news hit my parents like a physical blow. Dad's face turned crimson, and Mom's smile froze in place while her knuckles whitened around her wine glass. "That's your legacy you're giving away," Dad had sputtered. "Family should come first." "I'm taking care of family plenty," Grandpa replied calmly. "But I have more than enough to make a difference beyond our comfortable lives." The atmosphere changed noticeably after that announcement. My parents stopped complaining about Grandpa openly, and instead became oddly accommodating. When October arrived, and Thanksgiving planning began, Dad surprised everyone by insisting we host at our house instead of the mansion for the first time in 20 years. It's too much work for Dad with his heart condition, he explained with unusual concern. We can handle it this year. Grandpa seemed touched by this apparent thoughtfulness, but something felt off about the sudden change in attitude. My suspicions grew when I walked into Dad's home office one evening to ask about Thanksgiving plans and found him frantically closing browser tabs when he noticed me. I caught a glimpse of one headline before it disappeared. Undetectable substances that mimic natural causes. Just doing some research, Dad said too quickly, standing up to usher me out. What did you need, son? I mumbled something about table settings and backed out of the room, my heart pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep as I replayed the moment over and over. It had to be innocent, I tried to convince myself. Dad wouldn't actually harm his own father, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was being planned for Thanksgiving, now just 3 weeks away. The following week, I started noticing more unusual behavior from my parents. They would stop talking when I entered rooms. Dad's phone calls suddenly moved to the backyard or his car. Mom began meeting with strangers who didn't fit her usual social circle. One afternoon, I overheard her mention after it's done to someone on the phone before quickly changing the subject when she realized I was nearby. I decided to visit Grandpa under the pretense of helping him with computer security updates, something I did regularly as part of my job. His mansion was as impressive as always, with its soaring ceilings and museum-quality artwork, but it was the warmth inside that always made it feel like home to me. Grandpa greeted me with a hug in his wood-paneled study. Though moving slower these days, his mind remained razor-sharp. After setting up some new security protocols on his devices, I casually brought up the upcoming holiday. "Are you looking forward to Thanksgiving at our place this year?" I asked, watching his face carefully. "It's a nice gesture from your father," he replied, though I noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. Though I admit it feels strange breaking tradition after all these years. "Has Dad been talking to you much about it?" I tried to sound casual. Grandpa's expression changed slightly. "Actually, he's been calling more often lately, asking unusual questions." "What kind of questions?" My pulse quickened. "About my medication schedule, for one thing. And he wanted to review my will recently. Said he was worried about estate planning." Grandpa sighed. "I know my health scare rattled everyone, but sometimes it feels like he's waiting for me to drop dead." I felt sick. "Has he been pressuring you about the charity donation decision?" "Not directly. But he did mention that the mansion would be better kept in the family, rather than sold to fund the foundation." Grandpa gave me a searching look. "Is something bothering you, Lonnie? You seem tense." I wanted to tell him everything, to warn him about my suspicions, but without concrete evidence, it would sound like I was trying to create family drama. And if I was wrong, I could damage whatever fragile peace existed between him and my father. "Just work stress," I lied. "Listen, if you ever feel uncomfortable about anything, call me immediately, okay?" He nodded, seeming puzzled but trusting. "Of course." On the drive home, I made a decision. I needed to find out what my parents were planning, if anything. It felt awful to investigate my own family, but Grandpa's safety mattered more than my discomfort. The next day, I started digging. Through connections in my cybersecurity work, I discovered something alarming. My father was in serious financial trouble. Despite the comfortable life they portrayed, he had accumulated nearly $2 million in gambling debts over the past 5 years. Several creditors were threatening legal action, and their house had a second mortgage that was 3 months behind on payments. They were facing bankruptcy within months, unless something changed dramatically. The timing of their sudden interest in Grandpa's health and inheritance made terrible sense now. They were desperate. While they were out one evening, I searched Dad's home office. Hidden in a locked desk drawer that my security skills easily bypassed, I found documents about emergency conservatorship and mental capacity evaluations. Dad had been researching ways to legally take control of Grandpa's affairs by proving he was mentally incompetent. The forms were partially filled out, waiting for a doctor's signature. I photographed everything and replaced it exactly as I found it, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. How could they plan to strip Grandpa of his dignity and autonomy just to get his money? But I needed more information before confronting them. I called Thomas Walker, Grandpa's longtime friend and our family attorney, asking to meet for coffee. I framed it as seeking career advice, not wanting to raise suspicions. We met at a quiet cafe downtown the following day. After some small talk, I carefully steered the conversation toward family matters. "I've been thinking about estate planning lately," I said casually, "especially with Grandpa's health issues. Have my parents discussed anything with you about his situation?" Thomas gave me a measured look. "I shouldn't discuss other clients, Lonnie. You know that." "I understand," I said. "I'm just concerned. They've been acting strangely, and I worry they might be making decisions that aren't in Grandpa's best interest." Thomas sipped his coffee, then set the cup down deliberately. "I can't share specifics, but I will say this. Your parents have inquired about the process of selling the mansion quickly, should the need arise." He paused. "They seem to believe such a need would arise soon." My blood ran cold. "And what did you tell them?" "That any such sale would require your grandfather's explicit consent and signature, or legal action declaring him incompetent." Thomas held my gaze. "Lonnie, if you have specific concerns, you should voice them." I nodded, thanking him for his time. The conversation confirmed my worst fears, but still didn't provide concrete evidence of what they might be planning for Thanksgiving. That evening, I did something I never imagined I'd need to do. I researched elder abuse laws and protective measures in our state. I learned about undue influence, financial exploitation, and involuntary guardianship. The more I read, the more certain I became that my parents were planning something terrible. The final piece fell into place purely by accident. While picking up lunch at a deli near my apartment, I spotted my mother sitting in a corner booth with a man I didn't recognize. She hadn't seen me, so I quickly paid for my sandwich and moved to a table partially hidden by a large plant, where I could observe them without being noticed. The man was thin and nervous-looking, constantly glancing around the restaurant. He passed my mother a small paper bag, which she quickly tucked into her purse. As they stood to leave, I heard him clearly say, "Remember, it works gradually. It won't raise suspicions if you follow the dosage I wrote down." I felt physically ill. I followed them outside at a distance and managed to photograph the man getting into his car. Later that day, I ran the license plate through a database I had access to through work. The car belonged to Edward Mercer, a pharmacist who had been investigated 3 years ago for supplying dangerous substances to caregivers of wealthy elderly patients. He was never formally charged due to lack of evidence, but had lost his job at the hospital. The pieces were falling into place in the worst possible way. My parents weren't just planning to take legal control of Grandpa's estate. They were planning something far more sinister. I needed to hear it from them directly, but I couldn't confront them without tipping my hand. I would have to wait and watch, gathering evidence while figuring out how to protect the man who had always protected me. Sunday evening arrived with a sense of mounting dread. I'd spent the past week documenting everything I found, creating a secure digital vault with photos, notes, and recordings, while trying to act normal around my increasingly secretive parents. I was reviewing this evidence in my apartment when my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered with forced casualness. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" There was no response, just muffled background noise. He must have accidentally dialed me. I was about to hang up when I heard his voice, distant but clear enough. He hadn't hung up. The phone was likely in his pocket or on a table, capturing everything. "We need to finalize the Thanksgiving plan," Dad was saying. "Dr. Bennett signed the conservatorship paperwork yesterday. Said he owes me for helping his son get that scholarship." My mother's voice came next, closer to the phone. "And you're sure he'll declare Franklin mentally incompetent? We need this to be airtight, Patrick. He'll do whatever I ask." Once we administer the mixture at dinner, Dad will show enough confusion and disorientation for Bennett to document. We'll have him admitted to the hospital that night for observation, and by Monday the emergency conservatorship will be approved. I felt physically ill, but forced myself to keep listening, recording the call on my second phone. "That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise," Dad continued, his voice cold and unfamiliar. "The mixture Edward provided will interact with his heart medication. It'll look like natural causes, a sad but expected outcome given his condition." My mother laughed softly. "The mansion will be ours by Christmas. We can finally pay off those gambling debts and have enough left over to live the life we deserve." "What about Lonnie?" Mom asked suddenly. "He's always been close to your father. He might suspect something." "Lonnie trusts us," Dad said dismissively. "By the time he realizes anything, it'll be too late. Besides, we can throw him a bone from the inheritance to keep him quiet. He's always been practical." The casual way they dismissed both my grandfather's life and my ethics made me shake with rage. These weren't the parents I thought I knew. Or perhaps they were, and I'd been blind to who they really were all along. "I still think we should consider the backup plan," Mom said. "If something goes wrong with the drugs, we need another option." "The forged medical directive is ready," Dad assured her. "If necessary, we make the call that Franklin wouldn't want extraordinary measures. As his son, they'll defer to me." "Perfect," Mom replied. "Either way, we solve our problems and get what's rightfully ours. That charity nonsense dies with him." I'd heard enough. With trembling fingers, I ended the call, fighting the urge to vomit. The parents I'd known my entire life were planning to murder my grandfather for his money. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. For several minutes I sat frozen, the recording playing over and over in my mind. Then, mechanically, I pulled out my second phone and dialed a number. "Jesse? It's Lonnie. I need your help with something urgent. It's about Grandpa." Jesse was my cousin on my mother's side, a district attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases. "Can we meet tonight? I have something you need to hear." After arranging to meet Jesse at his office in an hour, I tried to collect my thoughts. Should I call Grandpa immediately and warn him? Contact the police directly? Confront my parents? Each option carried risks, and a wrong move could give my parents time to cover their tracks or accelerate their plans. As I grabbed my keys to leave, my phone rang again. This time, it was Grandpa. "Lonnie, my boy," his warm voice came through. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day. You seemed worried, and I wanted to make sure everything's all right." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm fine, Grandpa. How are you feeling?" "Better than the doctors expected," he chuckled. "In fact, I've just finished updating my will with Thomas. I've made you the executor, Lonnie. I trust your judgment more than anyone's." The timing couldn't have been more significant. "That's a big responsibility, Grandpa. One you're more than capable of handling. I'm not planning on going anywhere soon, but it gives me peace of mind, knowing you'll be looking after things when the time comes." He paused. "I'd appreciate if you kept this between us for now. No need to tell your parents until after Thanksgiving. I don't want any drama during the holiday." If he only knew. "I won't say a word," I promised. "And Grandpa, I love you." "I love you too, son. More than you know." After hanging up, I sat in my car, staring at nothing. The responsibility I now carried felt overwhelming. It wasn't just about stopping my parents' plot anymore. It was about honoring the trust Grandpa had placed in me. He'd always been there for me, and now it was my turn to protect him, even if it meant going against my own parents. With renewed determination, I started the car and headed to meet Jesse. It was time to fight back. Jesse's office was on the 12th floor of a downtown high-rise, the lights of the city spreading out below the windows like a carpet of stars. My cousin listened without interruption as I played the recording of my parents' conversation, his expression growing darker by the minute. "This is deeply disturbing, Lonnie," he said when the audio ended. "You realize we're talking about premeditated murder and fraud here." "I know," I replied, my voice hollow. "My own parents." Jesse ran a hand through his dark hair, thinking, "The recording is damning, but we need more. Phone calls can sometimes be challenged in court, especially when obtained this way. We need to build an airtight case before Thanksgiving." Tell me what to do, I said. For the next 2 hours, Jesse and I developed a methodical plan to gather evidence. As a district attorney, he knew exactly what we'd need to ensure my parents couldn't wriggle out of consequences, or worse, get a second chance at harming Grandpa. First, we need to document the financial motive clearly, Jesse explained. Get proof of the gambling debts, the mortgage situation, any financial pressure they're under. I already have some of that, I said. I can get more. Next, we need to confirm the connection to this pharmacist, Edward Mercer. If we can prove they obtained illicit substances from him, that's another strong piece of evidence. What about Dr. Bennett? I asked. He's agreeing to falsify medical documents. We'll need to handle that carefully, Jesse cautioned. He might claim he was misled about your grandfather's condition, but if we can prove he knowingly participated in a conspiracy, he'll face charges too. We worked out a detailed strategy for the coming days. Jesse would quietly open an investigation through back channels, careful to keep it confidential until we had everything we needed. Meanwhile, I would continue gathering evidence while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. Most importantly, Jesse emphasized, we need to protect your grandfather without tipping off your parents. If they suspect we're onto them, they might accelerate their timeline or change tactics. I nodded grimly. I won't let anything happen to him. The next morning, I began implementing our plan. Using my cybersecurity skills, I gained access to my parents' financial records, documenting the extent of their desperate situation. The gambling debts were even worse than I'd initially discovered, with connections to some dangerous people who wouldn't take kindly to not being paid. I installed small, undetectable recording devices in my parents' home during a lunch visit, strategically placed in the kitchen, living room, and my father's office, where they seemed to have most of their private conversations. The technology was cutting edge, something I had access to through my work, and would activate only when voices were detected. How's the Thanksgiving planning coming along? I asked casually over dessert. Wonderfully, Mom replied with a smile that now seemed sinister. Your father's handling the wine selection, and I've planned a special menu that your grandfather will love. I bet he will, I thought bitterly, but maintained my facade. Need any help with preparations? Actually, Dad interjected, could you pick up Grandpa that morning? We'll be too busy here, and I don't want him driving himself. The request sent a chill down my spine. They wanted me complicit, however unwittingly, in bringing Grandpa to their trap. Sure, no problem, I agreed, already planning how to use this to our advantage. Over the next few days, the recording devices proved invaluable. I collected numerous incriminating conversations between my parents, including detailed discussions of how they would administer the drugs, the timeline for having Grandpa declared incompetent, and their plans for liquidating his assets. Once we have control of the accounts, we'll need to move quickly, Dad said during one recorded conversation. I've already set up the offshore account. Untraceable. What about Lonnie? Mom asked again, a recurring concern. He's going to ask questions when his grandfather suddenly dies. By then it won't matter, Dad replied coldly. The money will be secured, and what's he going to do? Turn in his own parents? Besides, I know things about Lonnie's business practices that he wouldn't want exposed. He'll keep quiet. This was a bluff, as my business was meticulously ethical, but it showed how far they were willing to go to manipulate and threaten even their own son. In another conversation, I discovered something even more disturbing. It worked perfectly with Aunt Harriet, Mom said quietly. No one suspected a thing. My heart dropped. Aunt Harriet was my mother's wealthy aunt who had died suddenly 3 years ago. The official cause was heart failure, and Mom had inherited a substantial sum that they'd quickly spent. This is different, Dad cautioned. Franklin has more people watching him. We need to be careful. Edward assured me this cocktail is completely undetectable, Mom insisted. It mimics natural causes perfectly, just like last time. I immediately called Jesse with this new information. They've done this before, I said, my voice shaking. My mother's Aunt Harriet. They murdered her too. This changes things, Jesse said gravely. I'll look into having her case reopened, but our priority remains protecting your grandfather right now. While continuing to monitor my parents, I also met with Grandpa's security team under the pretense of updating his home systems. In reality, I briefed the head of security, a former police officer named Sam Reynolds, about the potential threat. "We'll increase surveillance immediately," Sam assured me, after hearing a sanitized version of my concerns. "No one gets near Mr. Harrison without thorough screening, especially any food or drinks coming from outside." I also met discreetly with Grandpa's personal physician, Dr. Leanne Martinez, to alert her about potential drugging attempts. "I've been concerned about some of the questions your father has been asking me," Dr. Martinez admitted. "He wanted detailed information about your grandfather's medication, claiming he needed it for Thanksgiving meal planning because of potential interactions." "Did you give it to him?" I asked, alarmed. "Only very general information," she reassured me. "Doctor-patient confidentiality." But I found it unusual. Dr. Martinez agreed to be on call during Thanksgiving and to perform immediate toxicology tests if necessary. She also provided documentation of Franklin's current mental acuity, establishing a baseline that would contradict any claims of incompetence. As Thanksgiving approached, I made one more crucial move. I contacted Thomas Walker again, and with Jesse's guidance, helped Grandpa create an emergency legal document, explicitly stating that under no circumstances should Patrick or Diane Harrison be granted conservatorship or medical power of attorney. Instead, those responsibilities would fall to me, with Jesse as backup. "This protects him legally," Thomas explained, "but it won't stop physical harm. That's why the rest of your plan is essential." The most difficult part was keeping Grandpa informed enough to be cautious without causing him unnecessary distress or revealing the full extent of his own children's betrayal. After careful consideration, Jesse and I decided to tell him a partial truth. "Grandpa," I said during a private meeting in his study, "I have reason to believe Dad and Mom might try to challenge your mental competence after Thanksgiving, possibly by giving you something that could make you seem confused." His eyes widened, but he remained calm. "Because of the charity decision?" "That, and their financial situation is worse than anyone knows," I confirmed. "I don't want to alarm you, but I need you to be extremely careful at Thanksgiving. Don't eat or drink anything unless I've cleared it first." Grandpa nodded slowly, sadness etched in the lines of his face. "I've known something wasn't right. Your father's sudden interest in my health, the unusual questions." He sighed heavily. "But I never imagined they'd go this far." I squeezed his shoulder. "I'm handling it, Grandpa. Trust me. And maybe invite a few guests to join us for Thanksgiving? The more witnesses, the better." He gave me a look that contained both sorrow and pride. "You've become a remarkable man, Lonnie. Your grandmother would be proud of you." The day before Thanksgiving, I made one final discovery while retrieving data from the recording devices. My parents had a contingency plan I hadn't anticipated. "If anything goes wrong," Dad said, "we use the backup plan. We claim Lonnie has been manipulating Franklin, trying to secure the inheritance for himself. We have the texts from last month that can be interpreted that way, and Dr. Bennett will back us up about Lonnie's concerning behavior patterns." "Are you sure that will work?" Mom sounded doubtful. "It doesn't have to work forever," Dad replied. "Just long enough for us to execute the primary plan. We paint Lonnie as unstable, jealous, manipulative. By the time he clears his name, it'll be too late for Franklin." I felt a cold fury, listening to them plot to destroy my reputation and relationship with Grandpa. It was the final confirmation that these people, my own parents, would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. "Let them try," I muttered, downloading the recording. Tomorrow would be Thanksgiving, and despite the circumstances, I found myself genuinely thankful for one thing. I had discovered their plot in time to stop it. That night, I met with Jesse at his apartment to finalize our counter-strategy. The evidence we'd accumulated was substantial. Financial records showing desperate circumstances, recordings of my parents discussing their plan in detail, documentation of the connection to Edward Mercer and Dr. Evertsey Bennett. And now the suggestion of a previous murder. We have enough to make arrests now, Jesse said, spreading the files across his dining table. But timing is crucial. If we move too soon, we risk them claiming the recordings are taken out of context or were manipulated. And if we wait too long, Grandpa could be in danger, I added. We decided on a carefully orchestrated plan that would unfold during Thanksgiving dinner itself. Jesse would arrange for plainclothes officers to be stationed nearby, ready to intervene on his signal. I would wear a concealed recording device to capture any incriminating statements made during the event. Most importantly, we would ensure Grandpa had multiple layers of protection. I've spoken with Thomas, I said. He's agreed to attend dinner as Grandpa's guest. Dr. Martinez will also come, ostensibly to monitor Grandpa's health during the rich meal. Good. Jesse nodded. Witnesses they won't expect, who can also intervene if necessary. We then addressed the practical aspects of preventing any drugging attempt. I would arrive early to set up hidden cameras throughout the dining room and kitchen. Grandpa would bring his own water bottle, which only he would handle. I would subtly switch his food with mine if necessary, and both Dr. Martinez and I would be watching for any unusual attempts to add substances to his food or drinks. What about Sam Reynolds? Jesse asked. Is security coming too? Too obvious, I replied. But he'll be in a car outside, monitoring the camera feeds in real time. If anything suspicious happens, he can be inside in seconds. As comprehensive as our plan was, the emotional toll of orchestrating protection against my own parents was overwhelming. After Jesse left to make his arrangements with law enforcement, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what was happening. The parents who had read me bedtime stories, attended my graduations, and called weekly to check in were the same people plotting to murder their own father for money. Had they always been capable of such evil? Or had desperation transformed them? Either way, tomorrow, I would be instrumental in sending them to prison for a very long time. I called Grandpa late that night, ostensibly to confirm pickup times for Thanksgiving. How are you feeling about tomorrow? I asked carefully. There was a pause before he answered. Sad, mostly. Disappointed. But also grateful for you, Lonnie. I'm sorry it's come to this, I said, my voice catching. None of this is your fault, he replied firmly. You're doing what's right, even though it's difficult. That takes real courage. I learned it from you, I told him. After hanging up, I finalized preparations for the next day. I checked and double-checked the recording equipment, reviewed the signals Jesse and I had established, and packed a small medical kit Dr. Martinez had provided in case of emergency. Around midnight, I received a text from an unknown number. It contained only an address and the words, "Evidence you should see before tomorrow. Come alone." End of chapter 14. To our com. Immediately suspicious. I called Jesse. It's almost certainly a trap, he agreed, after I read him the message. They might have discovered one of the recording devices, or someone might have tipped them off about our investigation. What should we do? Ignore it, Jesse advised. We stick to the plan. If they're trying to lure you away, it means they're getting nervous. That works in our favor. I deleted the message, but remained on high alert through the restless night that followed. As dawn broke on Thanksgiving morning, I prepared myself for what would likely be the most difficult day of my life. My phone rang just as I was leaving my apartment. It was Sam Reynolds. We may have a problem, he said without preamble. I've been monitoring Mr. Harrison's home as requested, and a delivery arrived this morning. Flowers, supposedly from your parents. The card wished him well, and said they're looking forward to seeing him at his last Thanksgiving dinner with the family. My blood ran cold. The phrasing could be innocent, I said, not believing it myself. Maybe, Sam replied skeptically. But I checked the flowers personally. Nothing unusual found, though we're having them tested to be certain. Keep him secure until I arrive, I instructed. I'm heading there now. I arrived at Grandpa's mansion 30 minutes later, having called ahead to warn him about the suspicious delivery. He met me in the foyer, dressed in a sharp navy suit despite the early hour. Quite the production we're putting on today, he remarked with gallows humor. I hugged him tightly. Just a few more hours, and this will all be over. We spent the morning reviewing our precautions one last time. Thomas Walker arrived around 10, bringing additional documents that would immediately revoke any powers my parents thought they might obtain. Dr. Martinez came shortly after, medical bag in hand. I've prepared a fast-acting antidote for several common sedatives and heart medication interactions, she explained. Just in case. And I'll be monitoring Franklin's vital signs discreetly throughout the event. As noon approached, I helped Grandpa into my car for the drive to my parents' house. He was quiet during the journey, gazing out at the autumn landscape with a wistfulness that broke my heart. You know, he said eventually, despite everything, I still remember Patrick as a little boy, running around the backyard pretending to be a superhero. Where did that child go, Lonnie? Where did I lose him? I had no answer that could ease his pain. Instead, I simply reached over and squeezed his hand. Today isn't about the past, Grandpa. It's about making sure you have a future. He nodded, straightening his shoulders. Let's get this over with. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, I sent a quick text to Jesse. Arriving now. Stand by. His response came immediately. Officers in position. Signal when needed. I helped Grandpa from the car, noting with satisfaction that Dr. Martinez and Thomas had already arrived, their cars parked along the street. Sam Reynolds was positioned in an unmarked vehicle across the road, monitoring the feeds from the cameras I'd installed yesterday. Ready? I asked Grandpa as we approached the front door. He gave me a sad smile. As I'll ever be. I rang the doorbell, steeling myself for what was to come. Whatever happened in the next few hours would change our family forever. There was no turning back now. The door swung open to reveal my mother, dressed in an elegant burgundy dress and wearing her most charming smile. For a moment, she looked like the mom I'd always known, and I felt a pang of doubt about what we were about to do. Then I remembered the recordings, the cold calculation in her voice as she discussed murdering her father-in-law. "Happy Thanksgiving," she exclaimed, embracing Grandpa warmly. "Franklin, you look wonderful. And Lonnie, so handsome as always." We stepped into the foyer, which was decorated with tasteful fall arrangements and filled with the aroma of roasting turkey. Dad appeared from the living room, glass of scotch already in hand despite the early hour. "Dad," he greeted Grandpa with forced joviality, clapping him on the shoulder. "Glad you could make it. Can I get you a drink? I've opened that 30-year Macallan you like." "Just water for now," Grandpa replied pleasantly. "Doctor's orders with my medication." A flicker of disappointment crossed Dad's face before he masked it. Of course. Health comes first." I caught my mother shooting Dad a meaningful look, their plan already encountering its first obstacle. Grandpa couldn't be drugged through alcohol if he wasn't drinking any. "Mom, Dad," I said. "Grandpa invited a couple of guests. I hope that's okay." Before they could respond, the doorbell rang again. Mom's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as she went to answer it. Thomas Walker entered first, followed by Dr. Martinez. "Thomas! Leanne!" Dad's voice rose an octave in surprise. "We weren't expecting you. Franklin kindly invited us," Thomas replied smoothly. "I hope it's not an imposition. I've brought an excellent Cabernet to contribute, and I'm here to keep an eye on my favorite patient," Dr. Martinez added with professional warmth. "Franklin promised me your famous pumpkin pie, Diane." I watched my parents carefully. The arrival of Grandpa's lawyer and doctor had clearly thrown them off balance. This wasn't part of their carefully orchestrated plan, and they were scrambling to adjust. "The more the merrier," Mom managed, though her eyes had lost their sparkle. "Please, everyone come through to the living room. We're just waiting on Jesse." That was another surprise for them. I had mentioned that morning that our cousin might join us, introducing another complication to their plans. As we moved into the living room, I positioned myself to keep both parents in view while staying close to Grandpa. The hidden camera in my watch was recording everything, and the microphone in my tie clip captured every word. "Quite the gathering," Dad commented, trying to maintain his composure. almost like Franklin expected to need witnesses today. The comment was meant to sound joking, but it carried an edge that everyone in the room detected. Grandpa merely smiled serenely. Family is important, Patrick. Especially today. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as we made small talk, waiting for Jesse to arrive. Mom kept disappearing into the kitchen, ostensibly to check on the food, but more likely to confer with Dad about their derailing plans. I noticed Dad's eyes darting to the clock repeatedly, probably calculating how to adjust their timeline. The doorbell rang a third time, and Jesse entered, carrying a bottle of wine and a manila envelope that I knew contained copies of our evidence. "Sorry I'm late," he announced cheerfully. "Had some last-minute business to wrap up at the office. Diane, Patrick, thanks for hosting." Mom's smile was brittle as she took his coat. "We weren't sure you'd make it. Such a busy man." "I wouldn't miss it," Jesse replied, making meaningful eye contact with me. His subtle nod confirmed that everything was in place outside. We moved to the dining room, where the table was set elegantly with the family china and crystal glasses. I noted that the place settings had cards with our names, undoubtedly positioning Grandpa where they wanted him. Before anyone could sit, I casually suggested, "Why don't I sit next to Grandpa, in case he needs anything?" Dad frowned. "Actually, your mother arranged the seating carefully for conversation flow. I'm sure Franklin would prefer to sit at the head of the table, as usual." "I'm happy wherever Lonnie thinks best," Grandpa replied mildly. After some awkward shuffling, we took our seats with the seating arrangement thoroughly disrupted from whatever my parents had planned. Throughout the elaborate meal that followed, I watched as they tried repeatedly to serve Grandpa personally, offering to fill his water glass, insisting he try certain dishes they'd prepared specially for him, and growing increasingly frustrated when Dr. Martinez or I would smoothly intervene. "Franklin must try this cranberry sauce," Mom insisted at one point, spooning a generous portion onto his plate herself. "It's a new recipe." Before Grandpa could take a bite, I accidentally knocked over my water glass, creating a distraction. In the commotion of cleaning up, I switched our plates, a move noted by Jesse and Dr. Martinez, but missed by my parents. As the main course wound down, Dad made another attempt. "Dad, I've decanted a special port for you, a toast to family." "That's thoughtful, Patrick, but I'll stick with water," Grandpa replied. "The medications, you know." Dad's facade of geniality cracked slightly. "Surely one small glass won't hurt." "For Thanksgiving," Dr. Martinez interjected smoothly. "Actually, Patrick, even small amounts could interact badly with Franklin's current prescription. As his physician, I must insist." Dad's knuckles whitened around his own glass. "Of course, Doctor. We wouldn't want anything to happen to Dad. His health is our primary concern." The double meaning hung in the air. I could see my parents growing increasingly desperate as dessert approached. Their carefully planned drugging attempts had been thwarted at every turn, and the presence of witnesses made it impossible for them to be more direct. Just as Mom brought out the pumpkin pie, I received a text from Sam Reynolds outside. "Package delivered to back door. Woman matching your mother's description met with unidentified man briefly 5 minutes ago." I showed the message discreetly to Jesse, who nodded and stood up. "If you'll excuse me, I need to make a quick call." While Jesse presumably alerted the officers outside about this new development, I watched Mom serving pie with renewed suspicion. She insisted on giving Grandpa the first piece, going so far as to add whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon herself. "A special touch for you, Franklin," she said with a tight smile. Before the plate could reach Grandpa, Dr. Martinez smoothly intercepted it. "This looks delicious, Diane. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a small sample to test for Franklin's sugar levels. His glucose has been concerning lately." Mom's smile froze. "Surely that can wait until after dessert." "Prevention is better than treatment," Dr. Martinez replied pleasantly, scraping a small portion into a testing vial from her purse. "This will just take a moment." The tension in the room was palpable, as Dr. Martinez performed a quick test that I knew was actually screening for certain drugs. When she looked up, her expression was carefully neutral, but she gave me a subtle nod, confirming our suspicions. Jesse returned, positioning himself strategically near the dining room door. The moment had come. "Before we continue with dessert," Grandpa said suddenly, his voice stronger than it had been all day, "I'd like to make an announcement." All eyes turned to him. My parents looked increasingly uneasy. "This past week has been enlightening," Grandpa continued. "I've learned some difficult truths about people I thought I knew, about family I thought I could trust." Dad forced a laugh. "What are you talking about, Dad? Everything's fine." "Is it, Patrick?" I interjected, unable to contain myself any longer. "Is everything fine? Like your finances? Like your plans for Grandpa today?" The color drained from both my parents' faces. "Lonnie," Mom said quickly, "I don't know what you think you've heard, but—" I cut her off by playing a clip from my phone, their voices filling the dining room. "That old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise. The mixture Edward provided will interact with his heart medication. It'll look like natural causes. The mansion will be ours by Christmas. We can finally pay off those gambling debts." I stopped the recording as Mom's hand flew to her mouth, and Dad half rose from his chair. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "That's clearly manipulated. Lonnie has been acting strangely for weeks, trying to turn Dad against us. Is that why you researched undetectable poisons?" I challenged. "Is that why Mom met with Edward Mercer, who was previously investigated for supplying drugs to caregivers of wealthy elderly patients? Is that why you tried to drug Grandpa's food and drinks multiple times today?" "These are serious accusations," Thomas Walker said gravely. "And they align with the strange inquiries you've been making about Franklin's estate, Patrick." "We have evidence of all of it," Jesse added, his district attorney persona now fully present. "Financial records showing your desperate situation, recordings of multiple conversations planning this crime, witnesses to your attempts today. And the pie Diane just served tested positive for compounds that would cause a severe reaction with Franklin's heart medication." Dad's expression shifted from denial to calculation. "This is a misunderstanding," he tried, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is Aunt Harriet a misunderstanding too?" I asked quietly. My mother gasped audibly, her face ashen. Dad looked between us wildly, then made a sudden move toward the kitchen. Jesse blocked his path. "Patrick and Diane Harrison," he said formally, "as a district attorney for this county, I am placing you both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, elder abuse, and fraud. There are officers waiting outside, and they've already apprehended Edward Mercer, who has agreed to testify against you in exchange for leniency." Mom collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Dad looked at Grandpa, a final desperate attempt. "Dad, you can't believe this. We're your family. Lonnie has manipulated this whole situation." Grandpa looked at his son with deep sadness. "I heard the recordings, Patrick. I saw the test results just now. How could you plan to murder me for money? What happened to the son I raised?" Before Dad could answer, the back door burst open as officers entered, led by Sam Reynolds. At the same moment, Jesse signaled to the plainclothes officers outside the front, who entered with badges displayed. "The game is over," I told my parents as the officers approached with handcuffs. "You've lost." Dad's face contorted with rage, and in a final desperate move, he lunged toward Grandpa. I intercepted him, blocking his path. He swung wildly, his fist connecting with my jaw. I staggered, but held my ground as officers quickly restrained him. "This isn't over," he shouted as they pulled him away. "You'll regret this, both of you." Mom went more quietly, broken and defeated, as the reality of what they'd done and the consequences they faced sank in. As they were led out to waiting police cars, I turned to Grandpa, who looked simultaneously relieved and devastated. "Are you okay?" I asked, touching my bruised jaw. He shook his head slowly. "No, Lonnie. I don't think I will be for quite some time. But thanks to you, I'm alive to feel this pain." He reached out and squeezed my hand. And that's something. The house that had been prepared for a murder now stood silent, the Thanksgiving feast abandoned on the table. It was over. Justice had been served, but the cost to our family was immeasurable. The months following that fateful Thanksgiving were difficult for everyone involved. My parents were held without bail due to the severity of the charges and the flight risk they posed. The case against them grew stronger as investigators reopened Aunt Harriet's death and found evidence of similar poisoning. Edward Mercer provided detailed testimony about the substances he supplied and previous jobs he'd done for my mother. Even Dr. Bennett eventually cooperated, admitting to his agreement to falsify medical documents in exchange for leniency. Through it all, I visited Grandpa daily, helping him process the betrayal while managing the practical aspects of the situation. The mansion that had been the target of my parents' scheme became a sanctuary for healing. "I keep thinking about where I went wrong with Patrick," Grandpa said one evening as we sat in his study, snow falling gently outside the windows. "Was it giving him too much? Not enough? Did I make him feel he had to measure up to impossible standards?" "You can't blame yourself," I told him gently. "They made their choices. Dad had opportunities to succeed honestly. He chose shortcuts and resentment instead." The trial came 4 months after Thanksgiving. I testified about discovering their plot, gathering evidence, and the events of that day. The recordings spoke for themselves, damning in their clarity. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. My father received 25 years with no possibility of parole for 15 years. My mother, as the instigator according to Edward Mercer's testimony, received 30 years with no possibility of parole for 20. Additional charges related to Aunt Harriet's death were still pending, likely to extend their sentences further. I attended the sentencing, not out of vindictiveness, but out of a need for closure. Dad looked at me with hatred as he was led away. Mom mouthed, "I'm sorry," through tears. Whether she was sorry for what they'd done or sorry they were caught, I couldn't tell. Walking out of the courthouse with Grandpa, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. "It's really over," I said. "The legal part is," Grandpa replied wisely. "The emotional healing has barely begun." He was right. Though justice had been served, the psychological wounds ran deep. I struggled with guilt, questioning whether I could have recognized their desperation earlier or found another way to intervene. Nights were often sleepless, haunted by memories of the parents I thought I knew versus the criminals they had proven to be. Professional help became essential for both of us. Grandpa found a therapist specializing in family betrayal trauma, while I joined a support group for adult children of incarcerated parents. Slowly, painfully, we began to process what had happened and find paths forward. 6 months after the trial, Grandpa made a decision that would transform our tragedy into something meaningful. He established the Harrison Foundation for Elder Protection, dedicating $20 million to preventing elder abuse and supporting victims. "I can't change what Patrick and Diane did," he explained at the foundation's launch event, "but I can help make sure other families don't experience similar tragedies." The foundation focused on education, legal advocacy, and support services. I took an active role, using my cybersecurity background to develop programs teaching seniors to protect themselves from financial exploitation. Though nothing could erase what happened, knowing we were helping others brought a measure of peace. Life gradually found a new rhythm. Grandpa's health improved once the stress of the situation subsided, and he embraced his role as a mentor to young entrepreneurs. I expanded my consultancy business and began dating Amy, a lawyer I'd met through the foundation work. 1 year after that terrible Thanksgiving, we held a different kind of gathering at the mansion. The table was filled with people who truly cared for each other. Jesse and his family, Thomas Walker, Dr. Martinez, Sam Reynolds, and several relatives who had supported us through the ordeal. Amy sat beside me, her hand occasionally finding mine under the table. Grandpa stood to offer a toast, looking around at the assembled faces with clear eyes and a genuine smile. "Last Thanksgiving, I thought I was attending my final family dinner, though not in the way I expected," he began, drawing sad smiles from those who knew the full story. "Instead, it became the beginning of a different kind of family for me, one based not on obligation or blood, but on love, respect, and genuine care." He raised his glass, to chosen family, to healing, and especially to Lonnie, who had the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it cost him dearly. As conversations and laughter filled the dining room, I stepped outside onto the porch for a moment of reflection. The night was clear and cold, stars bright against the black sky. I thought about the journey of the past year, from the horror of discovery, to the pain of justice, to the slow process of rebuilding. The door opened behind me, and Grandpa joined me, wrapping a scarf around his neck against the chill. "Deep thoughts?" he asked. I nodded. "Just thinking about how different things are from last year, about what we've lost, but also what we've gained." He leaned against the railing beside me. "I've learned that family isn't defined by DNA, Lonnie. It's defined by who stands by you in your darkest moments, who tells you the difficult truths, who puts your well-being above their own comfort." He put his hand on my shoulder. "You are more family to me than Patrick ever was. Blood made him my son, but choices made you my family." Tears stung my eyes as I hugged him, grateful beyond words that he was still here, still part of my life. Whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger for having survived the unimaginable. Back inside, Amy caught my eye and smiled warmly, a promise of new beginnings. Jesse was telling a story that had everyone laughing. Thomas and Dr. Martinez were deep in conversation about the Foundation's latest initiative. This was family. Not perfect, but genuine. Not bound by obligation, but by choice. I had lost my parents to their own greed and desperation, but I had not lost family. If anything, I had found its true meaning. And in that knowledge, despite everything, I was thankful. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between loyalty and doing what's right? How did you find the strength to make that decision? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family is about actions, not just blood. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and may you find strength when facing your own difficult choices.